Emery King presents World-Class Detroiters. Tonight, two rare artists who enrich us with both their art and their compassion. Pablo Davis, at age 16, helped Diego Rivera paint the great Detroit industry murals. His massive body of artwork and his legacy of social activism cover an amazing 90 years. She's attractive and charming enough to be in front of the camera, but Linda Solomon spends most of her time behind it, shooting icons of beauty and fame. But what she really loves is spreading the joy of photography to underprivileged kids. Pablo and Linda, you are about to meet two special Detroiters.
Hello, I'm Emery King, and welcome to another edition of World Class Detroiters. First up, age before beauty. The remarkable Pablo Davis. At 90, he still pursues his twin passions of art and social justice. In Detroit, at 16, he lived with the great Diego Rivera and wife Frida Kahlo and worked on those famed murals at the Detroit Institute of Art. Over the decades, he has produced thousands of works of art, several of which are in museums. But he's also spent time in prison for his beliefs and devoted himself to those in need. Happy birthday to you. We joined Pablo at a picnic this summer on a small lake near Grand Rapids, where family and friends were celebrating his birthday. Anyone's 90th birthday is special, but Pablo's 90 years overflow with remarkable experience and accomplishment. Two of his 5 children, son Stephen and daughter Jan, attended the party hosted by his friend and patron, Jean Wharton, and her family. Jean met Pablo 4 years ago when she took an art class at the DIA.
He gave us the most wonderful lecture on what it was like to work with Rivera and what these murals really mean, which I really had no concept of.
A former nurse and teacher, Jean has a passionate interest in art. Becoming good friends with Pablo, she helped him with various projects while he lived and worked in his Southwest Detroit apartment. Then, 2 years ago, she invited him to live in her family's Oakland Township home, where he could work on the large canvases that wouldn't fit in his apartment.
Seeing him work is always a joy. At 7 in the morning, and he'll have been up working for a couple hours sometimes.
Give me a little more face.
On this day, Jean herself is the subject. For good reason, Pablo has gone by different names over the years. He was born Paul Meyer Kleinbort in the Pennsylvania coal mining town of Pottsville in 1916 to Jewish immigrant parents. Shy and unhappy in school, from an early age he found refuge in art. From the second floor of his family's miner's shack, he could see a garden that, at ages 4 and 5, he would sketch with crayons for hours.
I would fill papers up from one edge to the other with that garden. And I could never get enough of it.
All 5 of the family's children needed to work, so at 14, he followed his older brother and father into the mines.
What was the work like in a coal mine? Describe a typical day.
Hell, I was stuck in a small area, and I was hacking away at it to make it big enough for an adult coal miner to get in there and break the coal away. So that's what I did all day long.
It took an hour to get down to the shaft, 1,800 feet below the surface, and another hour to get back up. When the mine owner refused to pay for those 2 hours, the boy joined in a strike. At one point, police strikebreakers pulled their guns.
And they fired right into the picket lines. And they killed 14 of us.
The cops also used billy clubs.
And they broke heads left and right. And I got my head cracked wide open. And I woke up in a hospital.
Arrested and put on trial, he spent 3 months in jail. The experience radicalized the boy. He joined the American Communist League, intent on organizing coal miners and pushing for child labor and workplace safety laws. But the need to create art from the world around him also burned in the boy. These sketches of miners and others in his small universe were done when he was 15.
I have one guy who was coming out of the mine blinded by a mine explosion, and I caught him right there like that.
In 1932, the 16-year-old saw a newspaper story about one of his heroes, the great Mexican artist Diego Rivera, working in Detroit on a project at the city's Art Institute.
To paint automobile workers in a prestigious museum. an elitist museum. I couldn't believe it.
With 60 cents in his pocket and 6 of his sketches, the boy jumped a freight train to Detroit. At the museum, a guard turned him away. But as he sat on the front steps, a woman carrying a basket approached.
She said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I wanted to go in there and see Rivera's doing that painting. They won't let me in." She said, "Well, come in with me."
Inside, the woman and the boy found Rivera working.
This big, huge guy rushes over there, picks her up bodily off the floor, starts hugging and kissing her. By the way, they were newlyweds.
From the basket, he ripped off part of a cooked chicken and began to eat until he noticed the boy.
And then he turns to me and said, "Are you hungry?" I said, "Uh-huh." So he pulls off a hunk of meat, hands it to me. Then he turns to her and said, "Who's that?" And she said, "I don't know." And that's how I met Frida and Diego, just like that.
Impressed with the boy's sketches, Rivera made him an assistant and put him up in the apartment he shared with Frida. When Rivera asked him to put some tough faces on workers in one of the small panels on the south wall, the boy thought of a popular new comic strip.
Dick Tracy. That's a tough guy. So I started to do Dick Tracy faces on him. He turns around and he says, "Oh, those are good faces. How'd you come up with that?" I said, "Dick Tracy." He said, "What's that?" "What's that?" I said, "It's a new comic strip in the Sunday paper."
Back at his Philadelphia high school, the adventure turned him into something of a hero.
I had been working with a world famous revolutionary artist. Everybody was a revolutionary then. The Depression had turned people into revolutionaries.
After high school, an anonymous scholarship donor helped him attend the Philadelphia Museum School of Industrial Design. During his 4 years there, his work won him commissions from the Saturday Evening Post and book publishers before he graduated in 1938. A successful career as a painter beckoned, but a world about to explode had other plans for him. Coming up, Pablo's incredible saga continues, and later, Linda Solomon's iconic photography. If you spend any time with Pablo, he'll tell you stories flowing with amazing detail about being wounded while fighting fascism in the Spanish Civil War, about spending World War II as a machinist, crafting huge warship propellers, about sketching and painting for 3 months as a guest of the great Picasso in post-war France. The tales he weaves form a fabulous saga that tracks seminal events of the 20th century and beyond.
She was dressed very simply in a skirt and a sweater.
As Pablo continued to sketch Jean, he told us about other portraits of Hollywood divas like Streisand, Hepburn, and Marilyn Monroe.
She was breathtaking. I went, literally. You had to when you looked at her.
Pablo's fabled career often has the feel of legend. But in the late 1940s, he found himself doing an all-too-real stint in a federal prison. He was in Colorado to do labor organizing with Mexican farm workers. But the House Un-American Activities Committee was spreading the Red Scare, and it was not a good time for left-wing causes. Pablo and 4 Denver friends were hauled before a grand jury, and when they refused to name their compatriots, were imprisoned for contempt.
It was a behavior modification prison, and I was put in solitary confinement for 1 year and 3 months.
When the Supreme Court finally reversed their convictions, Pablo and Nancy, a fellow inmate with whom he'd become close during their prison stay, left Colorado and tried to disappear. Taking the Communist Party's advice, they changed their names and took on new identities. Paul Kleinbort became Stephen Paul Davis, and they settled in Ann Arbor.
I became a dairy worker, working with farmers, bringing the milk in, bottling the milk, all that stuff, for the next 6 years or so.
He and Nancy married, had the daughter Jan we saw earlier, and tried to live quietly. Then, his affair with an untrustworthy woman led to betrayal. One morning, as he was shaving, he was confronted by 2 burly men who told him,
"We're U.S. Marshals, and we've come to ask you some questions." I said, "What kind of questions?" "What's your name?" I said, "Stephen Paul Davis." know your real name.
He was arrested and prosecuted for having a driver's license with a false name. But times had changed. The Red Scare was lifting, and a sympathetic judge gave him only probation. His marriage over, he moved to Redford and began teaching art at the Brightmoor Community Center. That led to teaching for several years at Wayne State and Michigan State universities.
I went all out as a teacher in influencing young people. I didn't hold anything back. Politically, economically, sexually. I taught life.
His devotion continued to both art and activism. Commissioned portraits always helped pay the bills. But Pablo also committed passionate energy to working in many different styles and genres, often depicting working-class subjects, at times reaching back to critical events in his own life, such as this painting inspired by the miners' strike in 1930. He delved into more abstract expression like these reliefs on the Comerica headquarters in downtown Detroit. And he started major projects, like this huge painting of a Southern lynching, which he continues to work on today. When Pablo moved into Southwest Detroit about 20 years ago, he became deeply concerned with the plight of the neighborhood's impoverished elderly.
We began to do surveys. We knock on doors in Southwest Detroit. We'd find somebody comes to the door. There's an elder there in Alzheimer's, and there's 70-year-old children trying to take care of 90, 100-year-old parents.
Working with a group called Bridging Communities that provides food, transportation, companionship, and other help, Pablo became the driving force to build attractive, affordable housing for seniors. After 13 years of struggle, an elder living center was completed and named after him. More recently, he's donated the proceeds from the sale of his art to underwriting a proposed new intergenerational center where preschoolers will join with the elderly for activities that benefit both groups.
I think we'll leave it at that.
After about an hour's work, Pablo decided he was finished with Jean's portrait.
That's exactly my mouth. I know that it goes down like that. You just have my feeling on my face so right.
Next, Linda Solomon's work with Hollywood stars and with youngsters in need.